incredible. And you can hear me, and my camera looks half decent. I showered today, so that's a big plus. All right, friends, we've got a lot to get through. So my plan is to take the first 30 minutes or so of these office hours that David and the Omniscient team have kindly given me to chat with you and talk about how marketers can incite demand rather than just serving existing demand. And I think this is a very important concept because for some reason, the last few years, some weird things have happened. And when we consider marketing strategy options, serving existing demand basically means someone already wants the thing that you offer. It could just be your entire category. Someone already wants a flight from Seattle to LA and you're just serving existing demand, versus you are creating more demand for Seattleites to travel to Los Angeles for a variety of reasons. In this case, if somebody searches for a Japanese rice donabe, I don't know if you've used one, they make incredible rice, FYI. But it's like this clay pot. It's very difficult to clean and maintain. Geraldine won't even touch ours at home. She's like, nope, you take care of it. Paid like $300 for it. I think she's going to jump in and say hi. Okay. And the other option, right? The other option is creating awareness that leads to demand. For example, I found out about the rice donabe and this particular kind of clay pot from Taste Magazine. I think specifically their email newsletter that I subscribe to. That is creating existing demand by getting this editorial piece featured about them. So I tried to visualize a few of the ways to think about this. So most SEO, for whether it's branded keywords or unbranded keywords, almost all search engine optimization, that is serving existing demand. Paid search, same thing. Most conversion rate optimization, in fact, most every operation that you might do that's at the bottom of your marketing funnel or your sales funnel, all the comparison marketing, like, oh, I want to get a list of providers in this space. You're essentially serving existing demand. People already want that thing. You're just presenting your brand as an option. And then there's creating new demand, which most social media is creating new demand, right? If we exclude, replies to people who say, I'm looking for a donabe, does anyone have advice? Most content marketing, every webinar you might do, virtually every conference or event that you might do, nearly any blog post or article you might write. Most email marketing, right, is going to be new demand. Trade shows, direct sales, account-based marketing, freemium, all of what's now termed product-led growth. All of that is creating new demand. And there's lots of activities that straddle both. I actually think this messy middle is an interesting place to consider because a lot of marketers don't think about the demand creation side, just the serving existing demand, or the inverse, when both are required. I'll give you an example. A restaurant menu. When you go to a restaurant and you get the menu, they are serving existing demand, yes, but they can also create new demand by presenting items that you probably didn't consider when you walked in the door, but maybe now that you're here, you want them. There's lots of ways to do this on the website or in digital marketing as well. The most infamous of which is, back in the days when you'd buy a laptop or you buy a desktop online, and then you'd get to the end of the checkout process and they'd have 50 more screens where they tried to sell you things. That thing. All right, so let me start with two examples here. The B2B and B2C, because I think this will make it most relevant for the most people. So this is in the B2B world, the Eyes on Business Aviation software platform made by Collins Aerospace. I think a lot of people would be like, oh my God, that is a boring industry right there. Holy crap, you're talking about not even for commercial planes. This is an aerospace software application for management of, European, whatever, aerospace providers and builders. Okay, so if you take a look, there is no existing demand. That's not entirely true, but there's certainly none in search. Nobody is going out and looking for a business aviation software platform. The industry term is BizAv, B-I-Z-A-V. It doesn't exist. Aviation fleet software, business aviation technology, business flight platform. No demand, right? It's so tiny. But there are thousands of people in this industry who buy this type of software for their businesses, and they follow and engage with lots of platforms the same way I follow and engage with Taste Magazine so that I can get, all my foodie knowledge about which rice donabe to buy. So Cutter Aviation and Aviation Week and AIN Online and all of these places are essentially opportunities to create demand for a thing where there's no existing demand. And this is exactly what Collins does, right? They essentially, if you search for the Eyes on platform, they have gotten into all of these publications. This is where they do all their marketing. It's through PR, it's through partnerships, it's through events, it's through editorials and pitches to the sources of influence that already reach their audience. This is a product that used to be called Mountain Dew. It rebranded a few years ago to Matindu. Matindu. I'm not sure exactly how they'd like us to pronounce it, but regardless, the capitalization and pronunciation is confusing. You might have read, this is my wife Geraldine, who you saw on camera a second ago, in a Florida convenience store, one of the few locations where one can acquire Purple Thunder, one of the branded flavors of Mountain Dew that they only co-produce with this particular gas station. You might be thinking to yourself, why would Mountain Dew partner with a gas station? I have asked myself this question many times, probably more than any reasonable human being could. And this is because it's how they do marketing. They do marketing through product releases and development that creates demand and interest and publicity and awareness. You can see that Mountain Dew has been much more successful than many of the other Pepsi products, I think, in large part thanks to this. Whereas Pepsi does advertising and Super Bowl sponsorships and concerts and events and all this stuff, Mountain Dew simply releases products, weird, crazy, insane products with flavors that are unimaginably bad to the human taste bud and yet continue to create demand. You can see there's not a lot of search volume for worst tasting beverage in human history, but Mountain Dew has been very successful. And in fact, the interest in the category versus the interest in buying the actual product is massive, right? They've generated a ton of press and PR. There's even something called the Mountain Dew Belt, which is sort of where Mountain Dew is most popular. You can see this, and Mountain Dew knows it, so they created the Mountain Dew Outpost. Food and Wine covered it. This mountain outpost offers hiking, archery, and loads of unique soda flavors. I invite you to go if you happen to visit rural Tennessee and would like to check out something very strange in the world of product-led marketing. Okay, so B2B, B2C. How do we try and think about this, like conceptualize it? I found a framework I actually really like. It's called the influence map. It's used by behavioral psychologists. So behavioral psychologists essentially use it to understand where they can influence behavior change in a population. For example, you might say like, the last 20 years, because of climate change, California's forests, especially the national parks, have been inundated with these horrible forest fires. If you live anywhere on the West Coast, you've seen the black smoke blacking out the skies and making things super hot and horrible, and you can't go outside because of the air quality, all this kind of thing. And so the park rangers and park staff worked with behavioral psychologists to understand, hey, how can we impact human behavior that causes forest fires best? And they'll essentially it's almost like a visual framework of, here's the problem that we need to solve. Where can we change the behavior of people who are causing or affected by or impacting this behavior? And in the world of behavioral psychology for the national parks, right, and for California, they'd look at something like, I think the example given was that they found the best place to do it was not stickers, it wasn't email messages to people, it wasn't branding campaigns. It was when you drive into the park, you talk to a park ranger, because you have to buy like a pass, right? A day pass to go into the park. And if that park ranger mentions, hey, are you planning on smoking? Are you planning to have a, campfire, whatever? And they say, oh, FYI, we've had huge problems with forest fires. I'm sure you've seen it. They can shut down the whole park and cause a lot of danger. Can you make sure to do X, Y, and Z? And just those like 12 seconds of conversation had the biggest behavioral impact on the population they wanted to change. So there you go, right? This is essentially exactly what we do as marketers. We try and figure out where in the subset of actions and activities can we influence people to think about our products, our services, what we're doing, and how they might solve the problem that this group has. And so I'm not going to go through all of this. You'll get the slides. You can play around with it if you'd like. But the important part is that at each of these stages, right, each step of the, whatever you want to call it, the buyer journey or the behavioral influence map, there are different sources that impact people in different ways, right? So it might be over here, it's a trusted publisher. Over here, it's the park ranger or the salesperson. Over here, it is Twitter or Google or Facebook or Instagram. Over here, it's a webinar on a topic. Over here, it's news articles or family and friends or a trade show. And our job, marketing's job, is to target the right audience in the right places with the right message. So simple, so marketing 101. And yet, because of a lot of how digital marketing's evolved, it just can't get there. So if what you really need to succeed are these ones, right, affecting people in the problem discovery phase where they don't even realize what issue they have, don't go over investing in channels like further education, solution seeking, right, bottom of the funnel type of stuff if your problem is at the top or the middle of the funnel. And there's a quick way where actually search data can help with this. So I like to look at branded search volume for my particular brand, right? For Mountain Dew versus worst beverages on the planet, or more realistically, right, in my case, SparkToro branded search versus audience research software or audience research tools. And this might help you uncover where there's opportunities. For example, here's Airbnb, right? Search volume for Airbnb over the last 10 years or so, and search volume for vacation rentals, which are essentially the category that Airbnb has first filled and then completely dominated. And look, back in 2009, when Airbnb was first getting started, what they really needed to focus on was brand awareness. People who already had or needed vacation rentals needed to be made aware of Airbnb's existence and the opportunity and what that platform could do for them versus VRBO or listing it privately or whatever. By 2013, though, you can see that branded search volume has passed unbranded. And now what does Airbnb have to do? Problem discovery, right? They need more people thinking about vacation rentals as just a category, something to consider versus a hotel, maybe a vacation that they never would have taken or remote work they wouldn't have done. And today, Airbnb is probably not going to benefit from either of those in comparison to further education and solution seeking. It's all about getting people over the hump who are already aware of both the problem and Airbnb solution and getting them to choose Airbnb for whatever reasons they might have rejected them in the past, whether that's whatever cost or location or Wi-Fi, right? What you have to do is make the channels and tactics align. And it's at this point that that your speaker is going to realize he should double check and make sure everything's going well with the platform. Let's just pop over here. Is everybody's doing great? I still look like I'm live. Okay, wonderful. It's always sad when I just keep rambling on and whatever, my internet shut off. So both channels and tactics should align, right? So this is essentially my problem discovery phase, right? Whatever that is, that might be my keywords or my content or my entertainment and engagement focused content for social or brand awareness, further education or solution seeking. I'm not going to go through all these, but the idea is that I have a problem here. This is my biggest opportunity. Here are the channels with which I could solve that problem. So I'm going to invest in those, not the ones that are outside it. And I'm going to balance my efforts and focus on the areas where I'm going to have the biggest impact for the business. I'll walk you through my favorite demand creation strategy here. Probably will not be a surprise. So again, Taste Magazine, right, that I mentioned earlier. I got this email in my inbox. Salsa matcha's big moment to crunch. I read the article, liked it very much, went out and ordered a bunch of salsa matcha. I think 2 or 3 different brands. I have finished one of them. There's another one in the fridge. Why? Why did I buy salsa matcha immediately after reading this? Well, I'm familiar with Taste magazine, right? I've subscribed to them for years. I mean, I say subscribed. I pay nothing. I just get the email in my inbox, but I like it a lot. And I subscribe to Taste specifically because I want to learn about products like this. I like their recommendations. They have steered me well in the past. I trust them, right? They have no vested interest. These aren't filled with affiliate links when they point out to these places. It's just that they are trying to help people find good products and then building up their brand reputation and selling advertising, whatever else they do as their financial motivation. So I can trust them. They're impartial. They want to give me good recommendations. And it's already in my inbox. I don't have to go looking for this, right? It's in my daily consumption feed. This is my theory, right? That publications, people, podcasts, video creators, whatever, social accounts, events, influencers even, that match these criteria. They're familiar to your audience, they are liked, trusted, perceived as impartial, and easily available. These are the best marketing opportunities you have, full stop. And I don't really care that much about how many social followers they have or estimates of traffic to the website or domain authority, right? Back in the SEO world, or where they rank in Google's results or whatever. Like these IDGAF, y'all know that acronym stands for I don't gamble against fallacious metrics. So my belief is that an editorial endorsement from publications that reach your audience, right? That you can prove. I know that Packaging World reaches 34% of people whose profiles use packaging in their bio or about section. That is the most valuable marketing I can get. If Packaging World, Packaging Digest, Future Packaging, whatever, if they write about my solution or my conference or my webinar or my product, my software, that is going to have the biggest possible impact on the audience that I want, whose behavior I want to change, especially when it comes to demand creation rather than just serving existing ones. So there's ways to do this, right? Like you basically can go into, I'm going to show you SparkToro, but I'll show you a bunch of, and I'll tell you a bunch of other tools too, because I don't want to be purely self-promotional. I'm using SparkToro because I have access to it as an example here. So, right, I can find websites like, in using this process, 518 profiles in our index use the word privacy advocate in their bio. And if I want to influence privacy advocates to talk about my software solution, whatever, well, 11% engaged with threat posts in the past quarter. That's pretty darn good. 11% of privacy advocates engage with threat posts. I can imagine that if I scaled that out to every privacy advocate in the English language speaking world, at least, probably a substantial portion listen to, read, watch, engage with, subscribe to threat post. And once you know one website, right, you can plug it into SimilarWeb. This is free, by the way, but both SparkToro has a free version and this is SimilarWeb, the free version. Look at that. I mean, sweet. Just totally sweet. What SimilarWeb's saying here is people who visit threatpost.com also visit Security Week, SC Magazine, Security Focus. And SparkToro on the right-hand side is showing people who visit and share and engage with Threat Post, also also share content from or engage with on social, the Hacker News, Dark Reading, Bleeping Computer, CS Online, SC Magazine, right? So there's overlap, but also unique ones. Same thing with social accounts, right? I can see lots of social accounts that are privacy advocates engage with Brian Krebs. And once you know one social account, you can go directly to the platforms, Twitter, LinkedIn, or use a tool like SparkToro and see, people who visit and engage with Brian Krebs on one of his networks also engage with Swift on Security and Hacker News and Dark Reading and DEFCON and EFF, et cetera, et cetera. You can sort of do this with podcasts. Podcasts are tough, but SparkToro has a podcast search thing. You can find podcasts that are popular with a given audience. YouTube channels, you can do the same thing. There's other tools that you can try which have some of this info as well. This is BuzzSumo, which has some of that like social graph data based on the words and phrases that appear in articles that are shared. You could try out, this is Helixa.ai, which is an audience research tool similar to SparkToro. They have a kind of a unique visual interface around this. And this is, He looks at AI. This is audience. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce it, but it's audience with an S instead of an C. And they have a similar platform to be able to get this kind of data through the connection networks. All right, my last thing here. I'm sure as you're listening to me, you're like, wow, Rand, okay, so you want me to go find the sources of influence that impact my audience and then figure out the right messages to send them and then find some way to work with them and amplify that. That seems like a lot of work. Couldn't I just pay Google and Facebook to do this? Like, isn't that what their whole advertising networks are for? Yeah, they'd love that. They'd really appreciate it. You just spend more on ads, right? And then you might end up like these guys, where Procter and Gamble cut hundreds of millions of dollars from their spend and increase their reach. And Chase had hundreds of thousands of sites that they cut, and gosh, they saw same better results from cutting that. And Uber throwing away tons of money. eBay, right, spending a fortune on Google and seeing negative results and then basically turning it off and seeing improved results. I think what's going on here, and in stories like what Brian Chesky had to say last year, right, that essentially they can take marketing down to zero, marketing meaning paid advertising on the big networks down to zero, and have much of the same traffic, is that it is not contributing to new demand. What advertising is doing in a ton of these instances is not generating new demand. It's just serving existing demand that already would have come. So I like to tell the parable of the pizzeria, right? So if you haven't heard it, the idea is like, pizzeria owner, she's like, I want to grow my business. So she sends for 3 neighborhood scamps. These 3 kids come. She gives them each flyers. One's white, one's green, one's red. They all have discount codes for the pizzeria on it. And she's like, "Go distribute these around the neighborhood. Get me more business." And after a month, she sees that the kid with the green flyer is just crushing it. Like half of the business that's coming in has this green flyer in their hand. She's thrilled until a few months later, she talks to her accountant who says, "Yeah, business is up like 6%. And the pizzeria owner can't believe it. She's like, "No, 6%. How could that be? We've got this scamp who's, bringing in tons of new business." So she disguises herself and she follows the kid. She follows him out the door. She sees him take all his, little green flyers. And what does he do? He ducks into the corner right around the street from the pizzeria. And anybody who's walking by who looks like they're headed to the pizzeria, he darts out and hands them a green flyer. He's not generating new business. He's just serving business that already would have come. He's getting credit for business that was going to the pizzeria already. This is what Google and Facebook do. In my opinion, a ton of what is advertising value that they create supposedly is just getting credit for sales that would have happened anyway. And they love and live off that attribution because they know that you're not going to shut it off and try and measure it the way Chase and eBay and Airbnb and all these other ones did. Why work hard to make more sales when I could just get credit for all the sales that you're already going to get? This is their motto. So I think if you expand beyond the duopoly and you broaden your impact, right, the places where you invest, you have big opportunity. I like to call this influence marketing, not influencers. We're not talking about influencers, just influencing your audience through the sources they already pay attention to. And the idea is you find a source that reaches them, right? A YouTube channel, a blog, an event, a newsletter, a webinar. And then you go provide unique value that earns their attention. And of course, you try and wow their audience, right? You go above and beyond. You provide value they can't get elsewhere. You comb through previous work that's appeared on that channel. You figure out what resonates with them. And then you bring them to your site, right? So essentially you have some sort of either subtle or non-subtle call to action that when you work with that publication, person, video source, event, newsletter, whatever, you have a call to action that nudges them toward you. And you're trying to turn their audience into your audience. And then you do this again and again. You do it over and over again with the same publications that reach people, and you find new ones each time. So there's lots of examples of this, right? Here's Check My Ads, right? Who's done a genius job of this. I invite you to check them out. Packaging Europe worked with Rabo Research, right? They essentially saw, oh, Rabo Research is like, I want to reach all the packaging professionals. Hey, I could do a promotional thing with them. And so they wrote a piece on what does the future hold for advanced recycling. Here's American treasure Neil Patrick Harris, who, when he was launching his, I don't want to say Goop competitor, but essentially he's building this like big newsletter list called Wondercade, right? He went on all the late night talk shows, and he wrote an article for the bartending and beverage industry website Inside Hook. I don't know if he actually wrote it himself. Maybe his people wrote it. Regardless, genius and quite good advice, actually. Here's Cyber Six Scale working with that threat post company we talked about. The whole idea here, fundamentally, what all these places are doing when they think about this influence process is, I want this publication, person, creator, whatever, to amplify my brand. What could I do with them that would earn me coverage? And then they brainstorm and they come to a solution. I could pitch an editorial. I could be a guest on their podcast. I could be one of their webinar speakers, right? I could sponsor their email newsletter. I could publish research they'd cover. I could run a joint survey. I could get quote. The list is infinitely long. It's just up to you to come up with the creative ones. But the idea in each case is the same, that you want this publication that you know influences your audience in the right category, the right time, the right part of the behavior map to do it. And this is exactly how SparkToro has grown. So my previous company, Moz, yeah, we were all SEO and content and those kinds of investments. SparkToro is virtually none. We get almost no search traffic. Almost all the search traffic we do get is branded search traffic. But we get featured on a lot of industry podcasts, and we are interviewed on popular YouTube channels, and we get written about in other people's email newsletters and blogs. We do webinars, and that is what has built our, essentially tens of thousands of people who use the free version of the product every month, and a couple thousand, I think it's a little over 1,400 now, who pay us for the product, which has built a great business. It's grown almost as fast, I think just about as fast as Moz did in its first 2 years, despite the fact that we're a team of only 3 people and no venture funding. So yeah, I have one final thing I will show you, and then we'll get to the Q&A, which is I figured I'd show you this in action for SparkToro, kind of a cool trick here. So this is a couple months ago, right? Elon Musk sent this tweet. I realize now this deal, thankfully, has fallen apart, right? But he's like, I'm going to put the Twitter deal on hold because I think there's all this spam and stuff. And so we saw that on a Friday. We saw that tweet on a Friday, and I was like, oh man, Casey, could we over the weekend like put together an analysis, blah, 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 of all the fake Twitter accounts? Because we have this fake followers tool that we've had for a few years. And so we did, and it did extremely well. This is our BuzzSumo mentions analytics, which I really like their platform for this. It's way better than Google Alerts. And you can see just thousands and thousands and thousands of articles talking about us. And what happened after thousands of articles talked about us? They didn't link to us. Like SparkToro got almost no links, but we got lots of people saying, audience research software firm SparkToro, or SparkToro, a provider of audience research tools, has done an analysis of Elon Musk's statement and found blah, 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 blah. And look at this. We went from ranking nowhere, not in the top 10 pages, to number 1, number 2, number 3 for all these search terms. Kind of awesome. Kind of nice to know that you can do basically not really SEO, but just kind of PR and influence marketing. And if you get the right kind of coverage, Google will pick you up too. Pretty darn cool. All right. Thanks. The folks from Audition are going to make this presentation available. I am going to unshare my screen here. And Geraldine's going to come back and say hi to everyone. First, I'm going to activate the scientific calculator on my computer by having the wrong tab open. Okay, there we go. Stop sharing. Howdy, David.
Man, that was great. I was just dropping a message in a chat when you were going through it, but is it just me who didn't realize Mountain Dew rebranded to Mountain Dew?
Yeah.
Very
I
subtle.
feel like I'm not really sure what's happening there. All I know is that it is to the extreme.
Yeah, well, it's a strategy. It's a strategy.
Yeah, a strategy. I mean, it clearly works with their core audience, right? I think they've done their audience research. They know that their audience likes weird shortened acronyms. And I'm sure people who are Mountain Dew fans who are listening to me talk about how terrible it is are like, oh, this guy just doesn't get it, bro. I don't get it.
Never know. All right, so we do have a couple questions, and I think a big question we typically get for demand creation, demand capture is easy, right? Are you ranking for the keywords? Is organic traffic coming in for the keywords? If someone were to go and start building out their demand creation strategy and executing, how do you measure success? How do you know that what you're doing is resonating?
I like two things a lot for this. They are not perfect metrics. It's a lot like how you had to measure marketing investments back in the 20th century, but better. It's better. And that is branded search and direct visits. So direct visits to your website and branded search traffic, which you can kind of see in Google Trends or in your GA or your Google Search Console or that kind of thing. So essentially, if more people are searching for SparkToro each month than last month, or we can see a spike, if I'm on a webinar and there's 1,000 attendees and, we can time series look at when I mention, hey, that SparkToro has a free account or something, and we can go into our GA and see, ooh, look at this spike in visits from direct and branded search. Hey, that's pretty good. That's nice to see. We can see social media followers rise as well. So essentially, and email newsletter signups. So people who subscribe to either get our blog delivered in their inbox or get our the monthly email that Amanda does. That's pretty great.
Got it. And I just got a reminder from Carissa to announce the winner of the SparkToro subscription. We'll do that at the end. We'll get through the Q&A first. But it's interesting, Rand. We've been getting some questions from clients like, hey, we're seeing this direct non-trafficking GA going up. Like, what is that? Should we be concerned? And we're like, no, that's a great thing. You can do very little to control it unless you start building out a strategy for what you're talking about here today. But the fact that you can't track some of that means that people are talking about you. People are going directly to your website and just typing it in rather than just coming in through search. So a lot of folks seem to get spooked, like, oh, I can't track where that's coming from. How do I know?
Yeah,
we talked about this separately. You don't have to try to track everything, but maybe you want to go on a little bit of a tangent there.
Well, so I agree with you. It can be a good thing. What's great about it is your competitors, especially like the CMOs and CEOs of many bigger brands, they're not willing to make investments that they can't perfectly attribute. So if they can't say, we know that you, whatever, pitching 100 podcasts and being a guest on 40 of them and sponsoring 10 of them produced this amount of visits, which turned into this amount of revenue, they won't invest in it. They refuse to put budget against that, which is awesome for all the rest of us because it means that those channels, this sort of like influence marketing practice, is so much easier. Imagine if all the big brands were trying to do this too. It'd be horrible, but they don't. And so there's opportunity for the rest of us. I love that if you basically can believe in and convince yourself and your marketing team to invest in serendipitous, hard to track channels, you can beat out your competitors who refuse.
Yeah, and I think that's very timely advice. I mean, with this looming recession, I don't know if it's official or not, but lots of folks are talking about cutting marketing spend. So for the folks attending this right now, what you should be thinking is huge opportunity right now. Like for paid marketing will be cheaper. And also you have this opportunity to start building out your demand creation strategy. Awesome. So we have a question here from Ronnie. He asks, what about traditional demand generation is still true or still holds true with the concept of demand creation?
Yeah, I mean, I think that all the classic demand gen tactics that you might invest in. So, oftentimes this is like brand advertising and, television, radio, outdoor sponsorships, all that kind of stuff. Completely, all of those fit under the strategy that I'm talking about here. My guess is that many of you on this webinar are mostly focused on digital marketing strategies as opposed to like that kind of offline and big branding efforts, big advertising efforts. And so I'm trying to focus on the areas where you don't need a lot of money. You just need time, creativity, and a great pitch. and you can have impacts that are absolutely huge, completely outsized. Like, when you think about, I don't know, you're in the airport, right? And you walk by some billboard and it's like, check out the latest in biz aviation software from Collins Eyes On. And you have this like, man, there's like a million people a day who come through this airport. I bet that's relevant to two of them. Is that a great use
Mhm.
of marketing dollars? Like they probably spent, I bet they're spending 10 grand a day or more on this billboard in this airport. And I would argue you could probably outthink that and outperform that competitor by saying, hey, instead of being in the airport where it's like a very large amount of people, very few of whom are our audience, you can go use something like, whatever it is, Audience or uh, SimilarWeb or SparkToro. And you can find, hey, show me the audience that's in business aviation. And then what do they pay attention to? And how do I get in those places? I bet it's a lot cheaper.
On that topic of how do you get placed there? So we have a question from Alana here who's asking, what tips do you have for pitching those partnerships so that you can work with these sources of influence?
Okay, I have my two top tips for this are: number one, get a warm intro. LinkedIn's great for this. Your network's great for this. Your executives network's great for this. But essentially, if you find a publication and it's sort of relevant to what you or your client are doing, and you can find someone who knows someone there, right? So let's say you wanted to be a guest on the Omniscient Digital Office Hours, webinar series. You might be like, who do I know who's been on that before, or someone who could introduce me to someone who's been on it before, who could get me an intro to David, and then I could like send them my pitch, like, hey, David, you had this great guest, a couple weeks ago, and let me suggest we have this unique research we published. I think it'd be super relevant for your audience. But if you get that introduction from someone who knows David, as opposed to you get a cold email like that, the acceptance rate just skyrockets. So warm intro is my top tip. Now, almost everyone always says like, I don't have a network like that. Like I'm not going to know those people. Okay. If you don't, let me suggest that you start your relationship on social media where you know that person is paying attention. So go crawl their channels. Maybe they participate in a Facebook group. Maybe they're on LinkedIn pretty regularly. Maybe they, I don't know, have a YouTube channel and they look at their comments. Maybe they are active on Twitter. Maybe they're only on Facebook or TikTok or Instagram, but it's somewhere. Find the place where they participate publicly. Maybe it's their blog. Maybe it's the email newsletter they send out and you can send a reply to it. Whatever it is, go find that place and go engage. Go listen to the podcast and comment on it. Go, follow them on LinkedIn and have some conversations with them on LinkedIn about the content they're posting about or whatever. And then a week, a few weeks, a few months later, ping them, send the DM, send the connection request. That is kind of the warm intro of the social networking world. And it's one of the things socials enabled that's never existed before. It works like a charm. Like I can't tell you how many people who, if they sent me a cold email, I never would have replied. But they sent me a LinkedIn request after we've been chatting a little on Twitter and LinkedIn. And I'm like, oh, yeah, all right, sure, I'll accept that. And then they send me a thing. I'm like, oh, yeah, good to see you. Let's chat. Sure, we can, whatever. Let's do this thing together. Yes, that's the way it works.
Yeah, and I can attest to that strategy on both the person doing it and the person who's on the receiving end of someone subscribing to my newsletter, reaching out and saying, hey, let's jump on a call, see if there's no pressure, but let's see if we can partner up on anything. And
Totally.
I've taken plenty of those calls and others have also accepted calls. So
I think
amazing
this
tip there.
works. It works shockingly well for people who essentially like create content on the internet, which is most of these like publications that have influence, and anything in B2B.
Now, what you presented was the option to go after all these sources of influence and potentially a couple different tactics as well. What do you recommend as a decision-making framework for prioritizing which tactics to use or to start with? And this is a question from Kevin Rowe.
Yeah, Kevin. So you saw that slide where I basically kind of had all of the individual channels and how they map up to the influence map. So my suggestion would be go to the highest level you possibly can in the organization you're working for. So if it's your client, you want to go to whatever your highest person in that org who's talking to you as a consultant. If you are a marketer on a team, you want to try and talk to your director, your VP, your CEO if you can. Find out what the business goals for the business are for the next quarter and hopefully the next year, and then be like, aha, these are the goals. This is what we're trying to accomplish. So what maps to this goal? Oh, this thing. If we did this, that would map to that goal. Pitch it that way, right? You already, like, now you know what they're trying to accomplish, and you say, oh, okay, well, hey, you said you're trying to expand, awareness of our new product line in Asia Pacific. Let me tell you what we're going to do. We're going to find the sources of influence that reach our Asia Pacific target customer market and there's, and what they pay attention to. And we are going to be in all those places for the next quarter. And we're going to see results from this over the next year. That you want to pitch it the way that they think about the problem that they've got.
Great. Yeah, it sounds like you implicitly kind of refer or imply that this is a long-term strategy.
Oh, yeah.
If
Absolutely.
you focused on demand creation, don't expect your branded search to start going up the next couple of weeks or months. Even you were saying know the business goals for the year, but maybe even the next year. So what I'm interpreting that as, you should start building out the demand creation strategy for next year if you haven't already thought about that already, because relationships take time to build.
Yeah, man. I mean, Mountain Dew obviously invested in their whatever Tennessee home of beverages and archery, what, like 6-7 years ago. They had to build a big old cabin out there in the Tennessee mountains and then paint it and then get all these new beverages in there and whatever. And then they did all the PR and marketing around it. It's a huge long-term investment that they hope, kind of like Walt Disney World, right, will bring in, not just direct revenue, but brand awareness and affinity and loyalty and people who are interested in the brand for years and decades to come, right? They hope that like people in the Mountain Dew belt will bring their kids there and then they'll become lifelong Mountain Dew fans. And, in 10, 20, 30 years, they'll have more customers. Long term stuff.
So everyone get started today. We we got a question from Warren Tanner here, and I know Warren had some challenges getting into the event, so I want to make sure we get to his question. So Warren asks, any advice for larger B2B companies that have multiple target audiences and campaigns in market at all times, who are trying to correlate between these types of influence marketing with a bump to branded search?
Yeah.
There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah. So first recommendation is Amanda Natividad, who's my colleague at SparkToro. She wrote a great post on dividing up your audience personas into the different buckets that you need. I would check out that post. She has this great framework for sort of how she splits them up and then thinks about influencing each one differently with different tactics, and it's really, really good. And I think the post is called something like, you don't need customer personas, you need audience personas. And then she breaks those down. The other tip that I'd have around that measurement process. So branded search, what I would do is I would look across the last 12 to 24 months if you can. If you have 3 or 4 years of data, that's even better. But you can basically see seasonality in there. So in the spring, lots more people search for our brand than in the fall, or whatever the case. And you can map that seasonality, and then you just map the trajectory. So you basically say, okay, over the last 3 years, each year has grown 18% on average. Okay, so now map out what that would look like with just the organic growth, the investments you have been making, and then take a look the quarter after, 2 quarters after, 3 quarters after you make your influence investments, right? Your brand demand generation investments. Take a look. Did you see lift higher than 18%? How much higher? Where did it come from? Right? Make sure to account for that seasonality. Do you see particular spikes from being on a podcast, being on a webinar, right? That you can say, instant, like, hey, look, branded search went up by 200 more people when we did this event. And we saw 300 more branded searches when we, were interviewed on this podcast. And, when the week the podcast went live. Great. You use that data to sort of in microcosm show the effects, and then show the brand lift over time above what the organic growth rate would have been. Boom. Now you start to like build a model where people are like, oh yeah, I guess there are a lot more searches for Mountain Dew than I would have expected if we hadn't made these investments.
Great. So next question here from Kevin. What are the top 3 mistakes you made? He's asking about demand generation for SparkToro. I don't know if you want to answer that as demand generation or demand creation for SparkToro.
Yeah, I sort of think of them as synonymous, like demand gen and demand creation, the same thing. For me, I think demand gen has like this classic old school version, but yeah, fine. So top 3 mistakes we've made at SparkToro, is that the question?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, first one for sure. We definitely made a mistake, I think, by early on associating our brand with this free tool that we came out with called the fake followers tool. That thing that I was talking about with Elon Musk, like we used that old tool that we had made years ago before we had actually launched our product. And the only frustration and regret I have about that is that we positioned ourselves as being all about fake followers on Twitter before our actual product launched. So it was great for like getting traffic. It was great for getting our brand name out there. It was actually great for getting Twitter connections, OAuths to Twitter, which we can use to retrieve data. It's great for all these things. Frustrating though, from a positioning standpoint, because people started to associate SparkToro exclusively with the fake followers tool before SparkToro, the audience research platform, existed. That is my only regret. So I would say that was a sort of strategic positioning thinking mistake. Let's see. Second one on demand generation / creation is I think that I have failed to think big and broadly enough about demand creation. And I've stayed very tightly focused in the realm of digital marketing world instead of expanding out to audience research or market research or industry analysts. And those we're actually finding are people who really can use our product, and we just have missed them so far. So I think that's maybe more opportunity than mistake. The last one I'd say is, this is kind of intentional, but we haven't built a structure around measurement for this at all, because we believe in it. Like we're good. We don't want to bother with the time and energy it takes to measure this stuff. And it's going well enough that we don't need to. But if I were at most other companies, I'd probably have to do that.
So one last question related to the follower tool that you mentioned. Ronnie had asked, is the success you saw with that fake follower coverage about the Twitter followers, is the success what you're referring to as like backlinks that you got? You mentioned you didn't get any links.
We got a few, but very few.
Yeah.
No, the success came from
was showing up in
coverage, rankings, tons of direct traffic, tons of people knowing our brand name. John Oliver, right? The Last Week Tonight found some other of our research through that research, picked that up, featured it on their show about big tech antitrust. We got a ton of pickup from that, right? Like just all this incredible brand lift and awareness, and then lots and lots of what I'd call a halo effect from that. So we could see lower churn rates in June and July versus April and May. We saw higher numbers of people joining and more people trying the product, like just all these wonderful things. So yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Rand, I know we have 3 minutes here, so we're going to start closing out. We'll announce the winner of who's going to get a free SparkToro account. Thank you so much for taking the time to teach us about demand creation.
My pleasure. Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.